And we're talking Isao Takahaka's Grave of the Fireflies or Tombstone of the Fireflies, depending on which DVD you've picked up. Grave of the Fireflies is the more popular title, but the film operated under both titles. It's Grave of the Fireflies and Tombstone of the Fireflies. So maybe the first question I should be asking is your preferred title of the film. Um, of course, Grave is more of an Australian, this was more common in Australia for it to be titled Grave of the Fireflies. Okay, we're talking Grave of the Fireflies, and this is an anime film, a Japanese anime film. And what I like about this film is it's anime, but it's essentially a historical film about a brother and a sister on the run in kind of the aftermath of a World War II bombing, and they're essentially starving to death, and the film itself was semi autobiographical. It is based on a short story which was written in 1967. The film was made 20 years after, in 1987. And kind of watching through the film, it did strike me that the anime film doesn't date like the live action film does. It always stays timeless. And the copy of this film that you'll be looking at on wonderful, glorious Blu-ray from our friends at Madman Entertainment, it just looks incredible. And this film really does need to be seen on the big screen. And I know I say that every week, but I really mean it for this one. It's just an incredible thing. Now, if you have a look at some GIFs, that's GIFs, of the film, you can see that the film visually is extremely striking, and it's essentially two characters in the environment, in the Japanese environment, and it's an interesting film that if you look at say Kurosawa's Hidden Fortress, which was made sort of in the late 50s. And this film, you've essentially got a very similar Japan that's being depicted, a Japan of characters on the run and impoverished characters. And what both of those films do is they set up a very different sort of Japan as to say what's happening in Ozu's Good Morning, or numerous Ozu films, and also a film like Giants and Toys, which those films are very much about consumerism, and these films kind of give you that other side of Japan, that impoverished Japan of characters in their environment and kind of struggling with this landscape, and feeling very isolated from the landscape, which I think is a very interesting kind of way of thinking about Japan, of characters not being necessarily in with the nature, but actually nature against them. And that's something to think about. And you can see in these GIFs the fireflies, which it seems to take the attention of certainly the young girl, who we'll talk about in a minute. Now, the film, right, universally praised. Everybody loves the film. It's a haunting film. It's a deep film. Tissues will be distributed at the screening, ladies and gentlemen, because it's an extremely sad film. But I would definitely not say, well, if you don't really like sadness on the screen, or you're easily moved to great sense of emotion, to therefore keep away. I would not say that. I would say come along to this film because it's just a beautiful, beautiful film about the love that a brother and a sister have for one another, and um, the problems of war. Anyway, a lot of people like this film, and a lot of people in the West like this film. So the question I have is, why is this film so loved and appreciated in the West? Now, Roger Ebert, and Roger Ebert, was, when alive, a great champion of Asian cinema, but certainly Japanese cinema. And now he just adores Grave of the Fireflies, and he said it's not just one of the great anime films. He said it's one of the great war films of all time, and that's a pretty big statement to make, I believe, when there's been so many great war films. But the thing about this film is you don't actually expect an anime film to be this deeply moving war film, and this film very much is. So he put it on his list of his great movie list. Now he calls it, you ready? He calls it an emotional experience so powerful that it forces a rethinking of animation. That's how great he thinks this film is. It forces a rethinking of animation. Now, what he's getting at is Grave of the Fireflies is a great anime film for people who don't like anime, for people who avoid anime. So the question I have is this: if you don't like anime, or you think you don't like anime, come along to this film, and does it change your mind of anime and animation more generally? Flip side to that, if you do like anime, come along, and what do you think of this film? Does this film still challenge your idea of anime and animation more generally? And how do we actually place the film? Now, Rotten Tomatoes. Rotten Tomatoes is this website where they get what everyone said about the film, and they give it a rating. And don't we love a rating for a film? Now, Rotten Tomatoes, out of all the reviews and all the ratings that they could find, right, the average score is 97%. That's 97 approval rating, and that was based on 36 reviews with an average rating of 9.1 out of 10. That's incredible. 9.1 out of 10. So, next question: what are you giving this as a what number are you giving this film? Now, it says the website's critical consensus reads, an achingly sad anti-war film, Grave of the Fireflies, is one of Studio Ghibli's most profoundly beautiful, haunting works. Make of that what you will. Now, the question is, what sort of film is this? Is it an anime? Well, it's an anime. You're an idiot, Steve. Of course it's an anime film. But with anime that I have, it's not the problem with anime. It's the problem that anime is treated like a genre. And of course, anyone who knows anything about anime will know that there's genres within anime. It's like saying that live action is a genre. It's not. Anyway. But how do you actually work it out as anime? How does it sit with ideas that we have of anime, or sit against that? Is it a road movie? Is it a western, as in cowboys chasing other cowboys, sort of western? Fairy tale. There's a fairy tale aspect going on here, and that's something to think about. It's a war movie, And also, it's a family melodrama. Now, I've put question marks all over these genres. I think it's all of those films. But have a think about what you think. Now, the film, right, is an interesting film to watch outside of Japan because think of how America is depicted in this film, right? And what's going on. Now, Takahata, he repeatedly denied that the film was an anti-war film, and a lot of people have picked up the fact that this film is an anti-war film, right? Now, he says the film is not at all an anti-war anime and contains absolutely no such message. So he goes on. He says it was sort of intended to convey an image of the brother and sister living a failed life due to isolation from society, and invoke sympathy, particularly in people in their teens and 20s. Now, it is an anti-war film. Well, is it an anti-war film? Like, I don't think you walk out of this film thinking war is a great thing. Because you don't. You can't. If you walk out of this film thinking war is great, then I think we need to sit down and have a serious talk. Because I would be very surprised if that's the reason you have. But if you do, that would be a good conversation starter. But I mean, it's very anti-war. I mean, all war films are anti-war to some degree, you would think. But I think this is very anti-war. And maybe that's why people in the West like it. Maybe they like looking at America in a very negative way because, Americans are often lionized in war films. If you don't like war films, don't worry. It's not like that. Okay? It's not a war film like war films, which I'll get to. Sec. How to describe the setting? How is it shot and framed? And although it's animation, don't think that the film doesn't have shots and there's not a use of camera and things like this. It's a wonderful film. So when is it set? Where is it set is in place. And what on earth is going on with the Asian experience? Whose Asian experience are we watching? It's an interesting film because, it's essentially a brother and sister who are literally starving to death. They are looking for food. And most Japanese films, certainly that we've been considering in this course, is all about how do you experience Japan? You eat their food. And this film is lack of food. Like, it's an anti-food film as far as there is no food in this film. Well, there is food, but it's sparse and not that healthy. And you wish that those characters from this film were in other films where they could eat some good grub, literally. What is this film saying about Japan? It's Japanese people on the run, which is why it's such an interesting comparison to, Kurosawa's films. But certainly Hidden Fortress is one that's coming to my mind as I'm talking right now. Now, the question is, what is Japanese about Japanese anime? And the question's always been this thing of, well, how Japanese actually is Japanese anime? Because the characters look very generic. They have, these often massive eyes, and Astro Boy, all those roads lead back to Astro Boy. But often with anime films, they're overdubbed with American voices, which is a big problem. If you're watching a Japanese film, part of the experience of experiencing Japan is hearing the Japanese language, the Japanese accent, and if that's completely cut out, that's a problem. is it not? And also just the look of it. It feels very generic, very it translates fine to Western audiences. Now here is a quote from one of the readings. Although anime characters are highly stylized and sometimes deliberately modeled on Caucasians, with an eye to the Western market, names, clothing, and other cues more often clearly mark Japan. So the question is, how is Japan represented in, say, a show like this? And how is Japan not represented? Well, how is it a more generic idea of Japan? And like I was saying before, something that's very Japanese about the film, which is worth thinking about, is the way that here is a war film, not through the eyes of the soldiers, the, in scare quotes, heroes. This is a film about the victims, and it's through the eyes of the victims. And as the other reading that you'll be reading for this week talks about, is that Japanese cinema is often very interested in looking at war through the eyes of the victims, the innocent victims. So here's the quote. More often than not, though, anime views of war are through the victim's eyes. Well, I just said that, didn't I? And if the victim is a child, so much the better. Well, that's a double tick for Grave of the Fireflies, because the victim is a child. We in the audience may, I'm back to the quote here, we in the audience may see through the eyes of the orphans doomed to die in Grave of the Fireflies. Well, that's a spoiler alert, isn't it? It doesn't end well. But, Okay. Anime faces and acting style. So Stephen Teo, of course, is talking a lot about faces. If we think of experiencing Asian films by watching Asian faces and taking in what they reveal to us, we are directly experiencing a factor that will lead us towards greater appreciation of the films. So he's saying you've actually got to be studying the faces and considering the faces and watching the faces in animation. And that's his thing. So have a think about the faces, because the film is about the faces. But then it's not about the faces, because they're not real actors, they're animation characters. So how much expression do you get from that? Think about that. The film was remade as a live action, and that's like actual people, ladies and gentlemen, not animation, live action. And that was made in 2005 with the weird spelling of Fireflies, the like Fireflys, grammatically incorrect. Not very good, the live action. I suppose my question is, how would you remake this movie? Well, that movie, the thing with Grave of the Fireflies that we're watching, our Grave of the Fireflies, is kids, victims, all about the kids, cute kids, struggling to survive. And in that one, the remake, the movie tells the story from the point of view of their aunt. And it deals with the issue of how a wartime environment could change a kind woman into a cold-blooded demon. And that's not me coming up with a synopsis. That's the film itself. And it's not as effective. It's interesting to kind of watch characters from animation turned into live action. We've seen that a lot in particular films. Ghost in the Shell, Scarlett Johansson. You may be thinking, well, what do you mean Scarlett Johansson? Scarlett Johansson is a white Westerner, and therefore she doesn't really work in the whole idea of, well, that she's meant to be, I don't know, Japanese. Well, she was. She's cast in it, and the film was accused of whitewashing. She kind of was. Kind of wasn't kind of was. It was completely whitewashing. Anyway, how would you remake this film? Who would you put in the film? Would you keep it as anime, or would you take it somewhere? Final thought. Just some things to consider when you're watching the film. What's the pace of the film? How are the colours used? I mean, it is so remarkably stunning, this film. It's just an amazing thing. The sounds and the music is just absolutely wonderful. And also the setting, just this barren, destitute kind of place. I mean, it works because it's anime, because of what it can show you, what animation can show you, but also the way that it leaves things up to the imagination. There are clear binaries, good, bad, America, Japan. Where are they? How are they used? Describe the camera and the use of the camera and the silences and the music, which is, again, extremely effective. What is the Asian experience of the film, and how do we culturally and socially position it? Who's the intended audience? Are we the intended audiences? And Asian authenticity, I'm interested in that. You may think, Steve, you're an idiot again because it's an anime. It can't be authentic, you idiot. Well, I think it can. I think it can. And I think there is great authenticity here. I would be very surprised if people watch this film and aren't moved by the film. You should be moved. And if you're not moved, then you should be talking to me about that, because I'd be very interested to know why a film like this doesn't move you. So have a think about that. And if it doesn't move you, I'm putting in a call to my local GP, and he's going to check your heart. How would you describe the setting, and how is it shot and framed? There are more questions to consider when you're watching the wonderful Grave of the Fireflies. And an animation and anime unlike you've never seen before. So I'm going to leave it there. And I look forward to watching this on wonderful Blu-ray on the big screen with all of your good selves. So I'll leave it there. And I will just, for now, say bye for now. So bye for now.